Hello and welcome back to the AGRIMINDS podcast. I'm Kacee Bohle, and today I am joined by Adam Walters with Tosh Farms. Welcome to the AGRIMINDS podcast, Adam.
Oh, thank you, Kacee. It's an honor that you asked me to be on here.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I think we're probably going to talk all things leadership today. And for a little bit of context, Adam and I have been working together on a couple projects over the last, I think, 2 years. Has it been 2 years?
Mhm.
Um,
It has been.
and I've seen a level of leadership, not only from you and the folks that you work with, but the company that you work with as well. And I just was really impressed by it. And I've worked with a lot of different companies and a lot of different leaders within the ag industry, and you guys do some stuff a little bit different. So I want to get into that, but I also want to really just talk about how you got into your position and your leadership journey as well. So, would you share with people a little bit about who you are, where you're from, what do you do?
Yeah, no problem, Kacee. I grew up in Seymour, Tennessee, on a family farm. The farm's name was Spring Hill Farms, and we also had a land race, and that was L&W Land Race. We probably had, I think it's 50 to 75 sows, and we had tobacco, some row crop, hay, and it was just a great atmosphere for me and my brother to grow up on. We had a creek and some woods, so I really don't remember wearing shoes until I started school during the summer. So that was that was fun, running around and playing in the creeks, catching animals and stuff, and from that, the hog side of it, my dad went in partners with Ed Lidval. That's where the L comes in on L&W Land Race, and we were probably 15 minutes outside of Knoxville. So we had there'd be a lot of classes from the University of Tennessee come and do some necropsies and just ag classes, checking out the farm, and so it was always like a classroom environment when I was in the barns. Having my dad and Mr. Ed Lidval, is always, if you're there doing something, you might as well learn how to do it right. So we were taught that at a young age, and but growing up, I didn't want really anything to do with the farm once I got older. I went to After high school, I went to Emory Henry College and played football for 1 year and ruptured a disc in my back, and that ended my football career. But I guess a lot of the commitment and dedication you got to have playing sports. I really enjoyed the structure and being part of a team, and I know, you know, in high school, some of the teams I was the captain on, but I know my leadership skills were horrible when I was younger. So, that idea of saying people are born leaders, I can see that a little bit, but as long as you're evolving every day and trying to get better, you can continue to become a lot more than you are. Um, but then, after college, I had a geography and city planning degree, worked at the Planning District Commission in Marion, Virginia. I believe it's called Mount Rogers Planning District Commission. I worked there for a year and had more back problems. And so I moved back home to Knoxville. And my brother, when I was going through all this, he had started at Tosh. And in February, he's been at Tosh for 24 years. Or no, it's 23. And I'll be at Tosh 19. So his family was already in West Tennessee, and he started there after he got his master's from Knoxville. And I moved down to West Tennessee with my family probably in '05, winter of '05, and had my last back surgery in I think it's August of '06. They replaced two of my discs, and as soon as I got clear to start working, Jeremy talked me into working at Tosh. Uh, I don't know if it's because he just wanted somebody else there with him, but it was, it was when it was starting to expand and grow, and he told me about the job and what it was like and the company, and like I never knew there was jobs like this in ag. it's not something you ever really hear about much. Being in the state of Tennessee, it's not like, oh, we're North Carolina or Minnesota where there's all kinds of jobs for ag. And so I started in February of 2007 and started out as what is called a service tech at the time. And it was in the finishing department. And so probably 2008, 2009, Jimmy had decided he's going to switch all from finishing in nurseries to all wean to finish. And, that's, I started right at the time with that. So, you know, pretty much all of my 19 years at Tosh have been working in the wean to finish department, dealing with the protocols of starting wean pigs off, learning the ventilation in the barns and controlling all that. And when I started, I think there was maybe 4 managers in the wean to finish department, and today I have 20, including myself. We marketed 300,000 pigs, I believe, in '07, and in 2025 we sold 1.1 million. So there's been a lot of expansion since I started, and it's it's been a lot of fun. You learn a lot of stuff when how to structure certain jobs, create new jobs. Our management is set up a little bit different than other farms on how we manage the wean to finish barns. And, it's, I guess you're saying Tosh does some stuff a little different. It's, the goal is the same at every farm you go to, whether it's Tosh, Smithfield, Mashoffs, or whatever. It's, your goal is to market as many full value pigs as you possibly can, but every farm does a little different. And, so with Mr. Tosh, Jimmy knowing that, and my boss Jay Oliver knowing that, it was how to set up and structure what worked best for Tosh. Um, we're still evolving that, but it was completely different, the jobs now, than it was when I started. We're more specialized. We have people who, just take care and count the baby pigs and sort them out, and that's all they do. And then we have people that work a lot with the holding the growers accountable, checking maintenance and understanding ventilation. Then we have a group that does all the sales and the weigh-in. And so, the way we looked at it, it worked better for us having people who were experts in each department than just having people who knew a little bit about each section. And for us, that's worked out pretty well. And we collaborate a lot with PIC. That's where we get our genetics from. And I was doing a podcast for them back in the spring, and they were telling me that I was getting long winded and I had to cut it off. And so I told everybody, so if you take anything away from this, just, everything that PIC is saying, that Zoetis is telling you to do, they're exactly right. If you can follow through and do everything they ask you, you're going to be successful. But the big part with that is, the follow through, making sure everything's executed correctly. And so that's, I think that's where I feel like my expertise is paying attention to the small details and making sure that, everybody's aware of their responsibilities and know what's expected. And, and also, whenever I hire a new manager in, we go through 5 weeks of training, and that might seem a little excessive, but, we're not, the only time we're in the same place is maybe once a quarter when we have our quarterly meeting. So I want somebody who's trained and very comfortable with what their responsibilities are before we turn them loose on their own. And, we're not in the same room all the time or even at the same farm, but, we do a lot of text message and calling, Zoom calls and stuff. But, it takes a high level of responsibility from those people to be able to work at the level we want them to without somebody looking over their shoulders all the time. And, the training period, I think that makes a huge difference. And, as well as I do, whenever you're down people and you're trying to fill a position, it's very hard to, you're always wanting to go on and fill that role. It's like, well, this person is doing really well and they're 2 weeks in, we can go on and push them in, but those situations never really work out well. So I stick with the 5 weeks. And, that seems to be a good amount of time for them to get in, meet everybody they're working with, get to the farms, know the drivers, understand the protocols. And it gives them enough time also to realize if this is something they want to do or if they want to try something else. And also, whenever I move managers through different parts of the wing to finish department, we have the baby pig techs, regional managers, and the sales team. If I move a baby pig tech to a regional manager, there's another 5 weeks of training. If I move a regional manager to the sales team, there's another 5 weeks of training. And again, that's just to ensure that everybody's comfortable with what they're doing and the decisions they can be making. I think if you're comfortable and know the expectations, you're going to work a lot better and make better decisions.
Yeah, there's so much good information in there. So I want to go back just a minute. So you talked about when you were maybe being one of the leaders on your team, and you said something about like, I had horrible leadership skills. What made you say that? Do you have an
I
example of
was
why you
bad.
thought you had bad leadership skills?
Well, it was just knowing my mindset and the age I was. I mean, you can lead by example. And I think that was the biggest thing that I always had. I was the first one there and the last one to leave. And, I always went by, you know, there's going to be people out there smarter than me, people out there, playing sports who are bigger, stronger, and faster. But, one thing you can always determine is that you're the hardest worker out there. And, if you keep that mindset, you're going to be successful with what you're doing. But as far as examples of why I wasn't, I just look at where I'm at now and think, that, I had no clue really how to manage outside of just leading by example. Like
Yeah.
sitting down, getting to know somebody really and communicating with that and building those relationships. It wasn't, I wasn't very good at that time. And, but I guess apparently somebody thought I was to put me in that position.
I can look back to so many things in my life when, I was just starting off in a new job or starting off being a new member of a board or something. And I'm like, why did I do it that way? Like, why didn't anybody tell me how awful I was or correct me? Right. And looking back, I cringe at some of those moments. Why did I do that? Why did I say that? Or why didn't I speak up? Right. And I do cringe sometimes looking back, but then also I look at where I am today and just in the last handful of years, how much growth I've seen in how I'm showing up and reacting. Even this morning, I was doing some reflection and I'm like, man, if I could go back and do this one thing differently, I totally would because I'm embarrassed of how I reacted or, just like really, really ashamed of some of the actions that I've taken. And I'm not too proud to admit that I've screwed up a lot in my life. But how do you, Adam, go from, hey, I'm maybe leading these teams, in the sports world to being in the position that you're in now? I know that you mentioned you started off as like a service tech. How did you get to where you are today? What did that look like? How did you start developing those leadership skills over time?
So, so you're talking about making mistakes. Uh, so my boss, Jay Oliver, he's a production manager at Tosh. So that means he's over everything Swan. And so we have the sow farms and wing to finish, and he's over all of it, and I'm over the wing to finish department. And he started at Tosh the October before I did. So he started in October of '06, and I started in February of '07. And relying a lot on him and my brother Jeremy, you know him very well. You've been working with him, uh, through calls and stuff, helping me, guide me through the way. And because it was, I had 2 weeks of training, and then back then all the controls were different, all the farms were different ages, and it was a lot. But I had those two people, I had the support from them to grow and learn. And you talk about making mistakes. Jay jokes with me all the time that, that I've made every mistake possible, but I never make it twice. So as long as you learn from your mistakes and don't make it a habit of repeating them, you can grow and do well from that. But talking about looking back, so I was a service manager for 8 years, and that's where I had probably 15 to 20 farms where I'd write up reports on and just work with the growers and really learning how to hold somebody accountable and work on my communication skills with communicating to them expectations, and then also how I want stuff done. Because you know as well as I do, if you just tell somebody to do something, it's not really going to work out that well. And so one thing I always looked at from every situation, good or bad, you know, like you said, you look back and some areas you really messed up in. I'd always, I'm the one I analyze all my conversations. I always think, well, I could have said this better. I could have done this better. So I always go back and look and, you know, how did I, what message was I sending out? And how was the grower, the person I was working with, how did they perceive that? Because it's like, when you play that game, you tell somebody at one end of the line, you go to the other end of the line and see what they say. You can tell somebody the same thing, a group of people the same thing, but everybody's going to interpret it differently. So when you step back and realize that that's on you to make sure that communication is clear. And, you know, once you start looking at it like that, some of these situations where people get upset, I got to step back and look, how did I handle that? Did I handle that right? Should I have explained this a little bit more? They may not fully understand what I was asking them to do. And so the 8 years I was doing the regional work, a lot of it was managing the Tosh owned sites. And that was around 60,000 head. And we had about 6 employees. And so I learned pretty quick working with, learn a lot with the protocols as far as interviewing people, hiring people, all the protocols you got to go through to let somebody go. And with that, really learning how to work with people, because I spent a lot of time. The largest farm we have is called our Gilkey farm, and there's 16 barns there. And I've spent a good chunk of my adult life at that farm, and lots of days working with the people there, going through, giving shots, getting stuff ready, and getting to know the people in the barns very well. And so, I guess the 8 years of doing that really set me up for whenever Tosh was expanding more, because it seemed like as we were expanding and getting larger, each section along the way, there was opportunity to move up to another level. I believe it was, so it'd been 8 years ago. I'd worked at Tosh for 8 years, and then I got promoted to where I was over the baby pig techs and the regional managers. And so dealing with the wean to finish, there's probably nobody that'll listen to this that knows what a baby pig tech is, because those are basically your nursery managers, your nursery techs. And I tried advertising the position as nursery manager, and I could not get anybody to apply for the jobs. And so I was thinking one day, I was like, why don't I just call it a baby pig tech? That's not technically what it is. But I did. And I mean, I can put that job out today and I'll have 10 applications by the end of the week. It's amazing how just changing the title of a job, draws people's interest. And, but that's a lot so working in the wean to finish department, the biggest challenge everybody has is when the pigs come off that truck, having the best environment for that animal so they can get started on feed. They're coming off the sow. They're used to her being there. They're used to being on milk, and they're used to being in their pen. So you put them on this truck. Then they come to this farm. It's a foreign environment. They're in pens with pigs they don't know. Their mom's not there. And it's just very stressful. It's probably the most stressful day that they'll have in their life. And so the baby pig techs go through, and they spend a lot of time that day getting them in the right pens and sorting them out, and going over the medication and sorting protocols with the contract growers. And that position is very important, but it's also it's very intense. I mean, you got to be in shape if you're basically catching pigs all day every day. And but I was over that department, and then also over the regional managers, and I had a good idea with that role being here for 8 years, sort of how I wanted to start molding the department and talking with Jay and, giving me an idea of where he wants this department heading. And, I've worked with him long enough. We can sit down and have a 5-minute conversation, and I know the path that he's wanting me to take everything. And I start getting an idea of how I can get there. And, then after that is probably, 10 years ago, I was promoted to where I was over all the way to finish. And so that includes sales. And, you know, whenever the pigs get a certain age and a certain weight, our sales team, they'll go in and mark the pigs individually. And each truck we have, so let me start here with the sales department. Every week we sell anywhere from 125 to 130 top hog loads, and each load has about 160 pigs on it. And so the sales team, their goal and responsibility is to, whenever we mark the pigs, before we send them to Swift and Louisville, Kentucky, each pig's weighed individually. So we got to make sure we select the right pigs and keep the variance really tight. Because if we have outliers that are marked light pigs or heavy pigs, that'll throw the sort loss off on that load, and we won't be as profitable just based on how we sell them. We can lose a lot of money there at the end, or we can maximize our profits. So it's very important that those guys pay attention to what we're doing. And then whenever I took that over, it was, trying to make it more structured, setting it up. So, this is a very important job other than somebody simply going out and marking the biggest pigs in the pen. How can we structure that to train these people so that they understand the tools that we have and their expectations and how they can apply that in the barns to where they're prepared to do their job. And, I've been over all of it the past 10 years now. And, it's changed a lot, and, it's nowhere near where I want us to be, but, it's moving in the right direction. And, sometimes I feel like we're moving faster in the right direction. I never really feel like we're taking a step back, which is great. But, I know what I want it to look like and how I want everything to be. It's just getting there and getting everybody to see the same vision and to understand the importance of their jobs. And then also another big area is getting those departments to communicate with each other, because like the baby pig techs, they work a lot with the regional managers. So getting them to explain stuff to the regional guys and communicating with them about what they seen when they were there. And then at the end, the sales team work a lot with the regional managers. So having them explain to them, I'm selling out of this barn and we need to start consolidating, got to shut the feed off, and there's some pigs here that need to be sorted out. Just make sure that everybody's continually, they know each other well enough to where they're comfortable calling and pointing stuff out. You're not saying you're not taking care of this, but, I was here at your farm. This is what I seen. I want to let you know so you can get it addressed and take care of it. Because, again, I want everybody to feel like they're a part of a team. And so, every job is important as the next job. And, we have to rely on each other. If the person you're working with isn't taking the job as serious, or look at it as just a 9 to 5 instead of a career, to where they want to do better and they're concerned about the success of Tosh and just, the ag department and the swine separately. If you don't care about that stuff, you're not going to enjoy the job and you're not going to be as successful at it. And, I see a lot of people get here and they'll work 4 or 5 years and they get burnt out on it. And, it's, for me, I guess it's in my blood, and, I'm happy with where I'm at and the people I work with. And, I couldn't see myself doing anything different. Whereas 20 years ago, if you told me I'd be in this position now, I would think you were crazy, because it's the last thing I want to do. But, and it goes to saying that, we always end up where we need to be. and I look at my path on how I got here, I guess some of the signs I didn't see as clearly. So I had some surgeries and stuff that stopped me from doing what I wanted to do, that sort of put me to take a step back and rethink my past. What am I going to do now? How am I going to react to this? What's my next step going to be? And, luckily I ended up in a place where I found Tosh, and, it set me up in a position where I could succeed and, excel at something. And, I'm very grateful for that. And, it's, I'm just, it works out well, and I love what I do. And, I enjoy explaining to people how we do things. And, because like I said, every farm is a little different. And, if something's working for us, I want to share it with somebody else. And, maybe they got something that, they're doing that's a little different than what we do, that we could implement to our protocols and maybe get some more gain out of it.
There were so many places I wanted to go with that one too. You spent about 8 years really just on the ground level, learning the ins and outs of the business, the industry, and building those relationships, building your knowledge base. And you've realized what was working, what wasn't working. So when the opportunity came for you to move up in your role in the company, you took that with you. And it sounds like you know what action steps need to take place to continue to direct the business in the way that you want, but it takes time. And it's not something that is just overnight. This is what we want. So this is what we're going to start with. Like, there is adjustments and tweaks that need to be made all the time. And even just talking about the job description, right? We're trying to hire for this particular role. Let's just get creative, rename the role. Maybe the job is still the same and you tweak a few things in the description, but just changing the job title could attract some new talent. And so I think that's a leadership skill that you probably developed while you were in those 8 years of learning, okay, this is the job, but here's a new angle, a new perspective that we can think about the same thing. And I think that's true leadership right there. So even if you thought you weren't a good leader at the time, I think you were. I think that was within you, but no one really taught you how to lead. No one taught you how to assess or think about things from multiple angles. And I loved what you said about how Jay was mentoring you and said, like, you've probably made every mistake that there probably could be, but you've made the mistake one time and you
Yeah.
learned from that. And so next time you know what you need to do differently. But he allowed you to screw up essentially, but
Mhm.
within a safe container. Right. And I think that is super impressive looking back on some of the managers I've had in the past and some of the people that I've managed in the past, and how it's like we so badly don't want them to screw up because it could affect our bottom dollar. It could affect our people, our relationships, our products, whatever it is. So we don't want them to screw up. But that's what I think was so impressive when you and I first got connected, and just recognizing right off the bat that you guys are doing things differently. You're allowing space to learn, not necessarily the hard way, but the way that is most efficient for you to learn, which is by doing. You make the mistake, you learn from it, and that's what's going to make you do better next time and not continue to make that same mistake, because you don't want that screw up. So I loved that he gave you the space to do that. And then something else that you mentioned, and which I also found very admirable and just respectful of what Tosh does, is you're not afraid to share with other companies, even though they're competition in a sense. You're not afraid to invite them in and say, hey, here's what's working for us. And then vice versa. You're going and meeting other companies, again, competition, but you're learning from them and saying, hey, here's what they're doing. How can we bring this back to us? Or even, yeah, I don't think that's going to work for us. I love that that works for you guys. It's good to know, but it kind of confirms that the route that we're going is the right one for us. And so I think that a lot of the times people are scared to talk to competition because it's competition, but true leadership is not being scared of having those conversations. It's welcoming in challenges and people who are opposite and people who are doing things better than you, or whatever that is, and just being open to learning. And that to me is true leadership, is awareness and being open to being wrong sometimes and being open to changing the way that you do things. And I see that in not only you, but the teams that you're over and the teams that you work with and the company overall too. It's been so impressive watching you guys and getting to know you on a deeper level, and working with you as a coach and coming in and doing some trainings with you guys. And I just love how much you pour into your teams too. And knowing that Jay was a mentor of you when you were starting off, you're kind of pouring back into your teams too, of saying, I want to invest in you guys, not just as professionals working at this business, but you as humans too. I want to get to know you on a human level. I want to spend time with you. I want to know about your family. I want to know about some of the things you got going on in your life so I can support you, because the better human you are overall, the better work you're going to do at our company, right? Like, and I see how much you care holistically, and that's super impressive to me.
Well, thank you. And you mentioned support. And so that's the biggest thing, is the support from Jay to allow me to make these mistakes, and a support from Jimmy. If anybody knows Jimmy, they know that Tosh does a lot of stuff different than anybody else in the industry. And that's how we've gotten in the position we're in. So, thinking forward and trying to find better ways to do stuff. I mean, it's the opportunity's there. If you got good ideas and, you can figure out a way to increase your production numbers and stuff. Hey, we're doing it, and we don't we never look back. We just keep moving forward. And that comes from the top, everybody, realizing, setting the culture to where you can fail, but you have the opportunity to, you know, make changes and to learn from stuff. And, that's huge. There's not many places where the culture starts at the top and it trickles down to everybody.
Oh, that's so powerful. Yeah, and if you have the chance to go on the Tosh Farms website and read the story of how everything got started, and just not that Jimmy had his blinders on, but it sounds like he kind of did, of just like, here's what I want to have happen, and it's going to look really different than most people. And he was just so determined to do things the way that he wanted to do them. And so it's a truly inspiring story. So I just think that's so cool. And it's hard, right? Because there's so much noise out there that says this is what you need to do in order to be successful. I mean, those are like the most trendy posts or videos on social media of like, here's the 5 top things you need to do in order to make this much money. Or if you want to reach this level, here's exactly what you got to do. Here's the blueprint on how to make this thing happen. And so it's easy to buy into that, right? Like, oh, I want to spend $27 to get the blueprint on how to get 1 million followers on TikTok. Like, it's so easy, but that's how people are making money, because we want these answers, and it's not cookie cutter. It
Yeah.
may be, a fluke that it works out for you, and I think that's awesome if it does, but the majority of the time, there's no cookie cutter plan, there's no blueprint. I mean, there may be some basic foundations, but it's so important for you to recognize what you are doing, what's working, what's not working on an individual basis first, and, you know, check in with yourself and see what's working for you, and then going and helping others do the same thing. But if you can't get that right, how can you expect to lead other people well if you don't lead yourself well first?
Yeah. And I'm big about simplifying protocols. And, it may seem like it's complicated, training people for 5 weeks, but there's a lot going on there. And I want them to be super comfortable and aware of what they got to do and their expectations. But, you know, I try my best to take something and break it down and simplify. Because one, I mean, I've got to simplify it just so I understand it and so I know how to do it. But also, I've got all these other people that I got to teach it to. And so I got to break it down to where we have 100 contract growers and I got 20 managers. That's a lot of people that learn at different rates and also learn differently. So knowing that person's personality and how they learn and, how to approach them about certain things, I have to know how to do that differently with each individual and then teach them, hey, you have this group of growers. This is going to be completely different going over these topics with them than it is this other group. But we know that, and so we know the pushback we'll get, but this is the process that you need to follow and how you need to attack that situation. And it's constantly changing. you know we add more people and different personalities, and a lot of it's, I always say the pigs are the easy part, the humans are the hard part. uh, Pigs, they're not going to lie to you, and I mean, you can tell exactly how they're feeling and what's going on when you walk in the barn. But managing the people is the difficult part. And so I tell my managers that, if, because I get a lot of people who's never had experience working in swine, and believe it or not, there's not many hog farms in Tennessee and Western Kentucky. So I look for somebody who has a genuine love for animals and a great personality. uh, I can't hire somebody that, they don't care anything about animals and understand the responsibility we have taking care of those animals. That's the biggest part of all of it, is how you treat them and take care of them. And then also having somebody with a good personality. I don't want to work long days and do hard work with somebody who has a bad personality and is always talking about how bad this job is and stuff. And, just how that person approaches the job in certain situations, you know, that I can take that person, I can train them how to work with people. And like I said, teach them about the pig stuff. That's easy. Most of my conversations of how you're interacting with this person. What do you want from this conversation, and what are you going to do to try to get the results you want from that conversation based on knowing who you're talking to. And that's all stuff that if they leave Tosh and find a better job, they can apply it at that better job, because it's the same. You're dealing with the same type of people anywhere you go. So I always tell them, I was like, you're learning great management skills here at Tosh, because if you can manage the people here and what you're doing here, you can easily go anywhere else where you're managing a group of people and be successful. It's the same. It's,
Yeah.
you might wear a different suit, different work clothes, drive a different truck, but how you're managing those people, you're still doing it the same way.
Yeah. I think that that's super impressive too. And something you mentioned a few minutes ago was you kind of have like this minimum amount of time that you put people in training, and it's like we don't go less than that. Like at least a minimum of 5 weeks training. And what I thought was really cool is you're like, we're willing to train people about the job, right? We want to hire good people at the end of the day, and we can teach you the job, but we can't teach you how to have a good personality. We can't
Right.
teach you like work ethic or to care about the animals, right? Those are things that you kind of just have to come with. But the knowledge of the job, we can teach you. We'll train you on. But there was something else that you mentioned about like once we get to those 5 weeks or any time after that, if we're starting to notice that they are getting burnt out or maybe this isn't the quite the role for them, but we really like that person, you guys will go above and beyond to find them the right place within the company. Like you want that quality of person at the company. We're just going to help you find the right role, and you're not afraid to do that. And I think that so often companies are just like, oh, we hired you. This was a bad hire. This role is not going to work out for you. Best of luck somewhere else. And I remember when I first started my career, I started off in sales. And every job after that first job, I would only qualify for sales roles. Like you need to have 10 years of sales experience. And if you wanted to move into any other role, it was like, we need you to have 5 to 10 years of experience in whatever other category. And I really loved getting creative. I mean, I design all of my own flyers and social media and things. Like I love being creative. And it was really hard to be creative in a sales role, right? Like I I was limited in what I could do. And so I was like, well, maybe I would thrive in an advertising and marketing position. And so anytime there was an internal opening to move into a new department, get a little bit more experience in some other categories, it was like, oh, well, we like you, but you don't have the experience. And so every job after that, the only ones that I would get were sales jobs. And so I was like in this rut that I could only do sales. And it was exhausting because, like, don't get me wrong, I don't mind sales, but I think I could I think I could learn some new skills here. And I want to explore something other than sales, but nobody would give me the time of day to do anything other than sales. And so I was stuck until eventually I was just like, I'm going to start my own business. But I admire that from you guys for saying that, maybe we like you, but this particular role is just not the role, but we want to see you succeed. And we think that you
Mhm.
can bring a skill set to this company in this other role, and we're not afraid to try that. And I think so many companies are scared to do that. And I don't know why. I don't know why that's is it, like, what am I missing there? Why do people not want to do
Well,
that?
I think at Tosh, the range of jobs is so diverse. Um, you know, Tosh owns everything from the bore stud all the way to the semis that when we sell the pigs, they ship them out. We have our own accounting department. Um, we have our own shop with mechanics, inventory specialist. We have a slat plant where we make the slats that go in the barns. We have our own construction crew. We got our own concrete crew. We own our own feed mill. We have the feed mill crew, and we have a scale house where they weigh grain and stuff coming in that we buy. And so it's a very wide range. If you find somebody that's a good person and a good fit at Tosh that's willing to work, there's a position here. There's a job that will fit their personality, and there's a job here that they will excel at. And so that's what I look at. If it's not in my department, I want to keep this person at Tosh because as a whole, they're making Tosh better. And usually for my department, it goes to like a sow farm or something because the people love the animals and love working with the animals. And I had one young lady last year that there's so much driving in the wean to finish department from driving from farm to farm. And that wasn't something that this person wanted to do. So they transferred to a sow farm, and they've been super successful there, and they love it. It's a great fit. Um, and I had one manager that he was looking to move up, and I told him, I said, in my department, I don't have anything, but I get asked a lot by HR when other stuff comes up if I have somebody that would be a good fit for a role. So we had another management position come open, and I hated to lose this guy. He was a great employee, very smart, and he's going to accomplish so much here. But for his situation, what he wanted, the other job was a better fit. And so, I was happy for him to receive that job because that put him in a better situation in his personal life. And like I said, at Tosh, it's still making the whole of Tosh better if they're outside of my department. And I look at it as, I sort of get competitive about it. If I find somebody that's really good and I want them to stay here. What can I do to tell them about their career and other opportunities here? How can I paint the picture of Tosh I see in my head so they can see the same thing that I do? And so that they can understand, you know, the opportunities they have here that you just don't have other places.
Yeah, I work one on one with one of your other managers, and one of the things that they were struggling with was that they're kind of working with some entry level employees, right? Like this is kind of like the first step into Tosh, like they're taking care of the ground level. And they said, we get somebody in here and they may be in this role for a year and then they get promoted." And he's like, "I'm taking this personally because it's like, man, every year or 2 years, I've got somebody and I like them, and then they get really good at the job, and then they get promoted to a new department, and they're like, man, this kind of sucks." And I was like, let's look at this at a new lens. And so I was kind of challenging him to see the positive side of losing an employee. I said, but you're not losing that individual at the company. you should feel proud that you're doing such a good job leading them and training them and setting them up for success, that they're being promoted internally and continuing to benefit the company. And he's like, well, when you
Mhm.
say it like that, I did a pretty damn good job. I was like, yeah, you did. Like, you should feel good about that. You had a part to play and helping, develop somebody's career, their skills, helping them, be set up for success. Like, that's something to be proud of. And he's like, I've never thought about that before, but you're right. Like, he plays a small part in helping to build out the overall company with good quality trained people. And it's
Mhm.
not that people are just hopping through your department, because that's probably how it feels, that every other year you've got some turnover, but you're helping get people started. And he's like, man, now that you say it like that, it does feel really good. And I can watch them continue to climb and to continue to grow and lead throughout the company in different departments over the years. And that feels really good. And I think man, I was so impressed with him when he shared that. And he had that mindset shift of something that he thought was kind of bad news, but ends up, it's like, actually, this is really cool to be a part of.
Yeah, and so I maybe I didn't explain to him well enough my expectations of his department when I put him over it, but that's exactly what I want to do with what he's over. He's over the baby pig tax. I want to bring people in there that because I'm bringing in people that haven't worked with pigs before. He can develop them in that department, and as we see they want to grow more and there's other stuff that they can learn, then we can spread them out more. We can take that person and put them in some roles as a regional manager or somebody doing some sales stuff, to try to better fit their personality and, what their strengths are. Because if I have somebody in that role and, you know, what they're doing, they don't really, they have other stuff they have desires to do. And maybe we're not utilizing their strengths the way we should be, and then we can find a position for them that will better everybody. And I did also remind him that I'm not stealing your employees because they're still my employees. I'm just moving them somewhere else. But he's
Yeah.
done an excellent job of bringing people in and training them, and the details. And he really understands the small details, and that's huge in anything you do. If you don't do the little things right, you're not going to do anything right.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So we've talked a lot about leadership around teams, influencing those around us, whether it's family or whether it is, your managers, the people that you work with on a day-to-day basis. Can we talk a little bit about self leadership? What are some ways that you continue to pour into yourself? Do you invest in yourself? Do you have daily practices that you go through that help you with your self leadership?
And that's a great question, Casey. Um, I try to stay on a pretty good diet with my health, and because I'm 44 now, and you got to start thinking, the stuff I've been doing the past 20 years has put me where I'm at now. With the next 20 years, that's going to determine how the sort of the quality of living I have. And I've had 10 orthopedic surgeries. So, I guess you could consider me pretty much crippled anyways. So I've got to do some stretching. And, I got a home gym in my garage. It's full of equipment, and I haven't used it since, I had my heart attack, and that was at 38. So that was 6 years ago. Um, but I've slowly gotten back into trying to be healthier and staying active. I do stretching in the morning. I do push up routine, and I do watch my calorie intake and how much protein I take in every day, and that's just to ensure the quality of my life that I have 10 or 15 years from now. Because I'll think back, what how I felt 10 years ago, and I was like, man, I feel a lot better than I do now. Is it going to be that drastic the next 10 years? And what about the 10 years after that? So, all this all this stuff you do, it affects you long term. And, you got to start thinking about that. And, as far as personal growth, like, I do a lot of, and I haven't done this recently. Seems like this past year has been super busy, but, and I'm usually making phone calls when I drive from farm to farms. But, I like, listening to some audible books on leadership and, just trying to learn more about how to utilize the people we have so that they can reach their full potential. So and like you said, I got to be looking at myself. What can I do to give them the best version of myself? And, then that doesn't go just with work. It has life. What's my life like at home? And, because with my job, I'm on call all the time. And, I have it's probably 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. in the morning. I'll wake up and, about 30 minutes there, I'm thinking about something at work. And not to the extent I keep a notepad beside my bed, but some nights I wish I did. But it's always, thinking about improving. How can I reach this person to get them to be a better manager? How did I handle this situation? It never shuts off. But, the biggest thing I have is support at home. Like my wife worked at Tosh for 14 years. So she understands my job and my position. I couldn't imagine being married to somebody who didn't understand all that because, they would be pretty upset. It would go past just her saying, I'm not listening to her. She understands why I'm on my phone and what I'm doing all the time. And, but, with that, I have to make sure that there's certain things that, I don't miss out on every day that I have to get done. And, with my daughter, I always made sure that, I was the one that took her where she had to go that morning. If it was to daycare or to school, even the morning I was having my heart attack, I took her to kindergarten. And, but, you have to make sure that you're spending that time. And like, we'll have crazy conversations, uh, when I drop her off at school. And I think she was in fourth grade and we were talking about credit scores and stuff. And so, she asked a good question. I try my best to explain it so that will help her out. But, just try to be present in them moments when we have them because I mean, with what I do, it's not like I have excess time to catch up on stuff like it because nobody does. So, I mean, you have to try to be aware and I think about balance a lot. And, I don't know if it's really balance or just, being aware of if you went too far one way to pull it back to where you're giving more of yourself at home or at work, to balance it out. And, you know, like I mentioned my heart attack earlier, that was caused by physical and mental stress. And I've talked to you before about it. I think if I was on anxiety medicine at that time, I would not have had it. And, and I know you talk a lot about mental health and, the anxiety that's always, you're sort of, it's a thin line. If you can ride that line to where the anxiety pushes you to do your best to go above and beyond, it's great. But if it goes over too far, you never stop thinking about it. You never stop worrying about how good you're doing. And that's one thing I struggle with. A lot of this stuff, it's hard not to take a lot of the stuff personal. It's like, well, I could have managed that better. I could have stopped this from happening. When you're responsible for it, it's hard to let that go. And, it's a lot. And I know that there's a lot of people that go through stuff like that. But, with I'll talk to some managers here and he's like talking about, man, I don't know how to handle this and stuff. I was like, well, hey, I got some good meds. I'll tell you which ones to get on because they've helped me a lot. And Jay always told me, how he's super honest with me about everything. And he told me it's probably about a year after my heart attack, after, my anxiety was in check, getting better. And he's like, yeah, man. He said, you're not as big of an asshole now as you were before your heart attack. And I was like, well, at least I'm improving, as long as we're improving, getting better. But, that's how we talk to each other. He knows how to talk to me. But, it's hard. And, any, any person that's a high achiever has some form of anxiety that's driving them. I mean, that's what pushes you to do your best. And, everybody has days where it does go too far to one side. And, you just got to learn to let go of it. And, it's going to be all right. You can't control everything. It's going to be fine. But, realizing that and actually your body accepting that, I found out it's two different things, because I can know it and understand it, but apparently my body handles stress a lot different than I do. And I think a lot of people deal with that. And, that's one thing I admire about my brother is, there's not many things that I've seen in my 44 years that's really got him stressed out to the point to where I know how I would be. He handles that great. And, that's something I can pick up and learn from him, maybe how I can relax a little bit. But, and so I guess you're talking about what am I doing? It's being aware of what some of my issues are. If it's, you know, my bad back, my titanium knee, or my anxiety issues, I have to address that stuff, because if I don't, it's not just affecting me, it's affecting everybody around me. And then the last thing I ever want to do is for it to affect the people at home. And so that's hard, but that's a lot of the stuff that, nobody really talks about, because it's all performance based and we're all driven. And, you hate to think of, and it's not excuses. It's learning how to, I guess, survive through being, being very highly productive. And, it's a constant work. It's a constant battle. Um, I do like, I mentioned, listening to Audible and stuff. Uh, One of my favorite books that I buy for any new manager that comes in is Strength Finders. And it's, anybody who's been in management, that's probably one of the first things you get and go over it and think, this is just super simple of starting to think about how to manage and work with people. But the thing I love about it is it talks about your strengths, about what you're good at. It is so easy to get better at something you're good at than to try to take something you're not good at and become better. And I do it
Amen.
all the time.
Yes.
I think about what I'm not good at all the time and how I can get better at that. And then I will have a meeting and I'll have everybody go over their strengths. And I'm like, I'm trying, if not just for myself, to get me to understand that and to also look at that in everybody. But, you take the test in the book, it gives you your 5 strengths. And so at least once a year, my whole team will get together in a quarterly meeting and everybody will get up and present their strengths and, go over, I'm a achiever, uh, I'm a relator, activator, and I shared this with these people. And in these scenarios, this is where I can see that that's accurate with my personality and my strengths. And because, I don't want people constantly thinking about what they're bad at. That's not good for anybody's mental health. If you're thinking about what you're good at and what comes easy, you can easily become more productive in other areas and you can help people out, and that's part of the teamwork and everybody talking to each other, knowing each other enough to ask somebody a question like, how did you handle this situation? I see one of your strengths is focus, and I have a hard time keeping my eyes on the road when I drive. How can I improve that? And, it's just, I like that because it creates positive thoughts, and, you can build so much from that.
Yeah, a couple episodes back, Greg Kruger, who is one of the speakers at the summit, he was talking about strengths and he's like, I don't talk about strengths and weaknesses. There's strengths and opportunities. And how he's like, there's always an opportunity to learn and do better and turn something that you're not that great at into something that you're better at. He's like, but it is more important to focus on what are you good at and
Mhm.
show up in your strength. And we talk about that in the Working Genius too, around embracing who you are and who you're not. And one of the most common questions that I get is, okay, cool. Here's all of my strengths. Here's all of my geniuses. If these are my weaknesses or my frustrations, should I go and try and make those better? And I always say that wouldn't you rather spend your time doing stuff that fills your cup up and being better at what you're already good at than spending time trying to force yourself to be good at something that you're clearly not naturally gifted at, or it's something that drains your cup? I mean, I think there is an extent of working on things that you're not good at, but it's almost like I would much rather do stuff that brings me joy, and just
Right.
understanding, like, I know that's gonna bring me joy, and that's where I always say delegation can come in handy. Why not give certain tasks to people who, have a natural ability or a strength in that area? Because not only will it relieve you of doing something that's going to drain you, or it's not a natural gift of yours or strength, but you're giving the opportunity for somebody who does have that gift to do more of the things that they enjoy. And I know that delegation isn't always an option, but it's also reframing your mindset and your perspective about the approach to doing work or to doing something that's a weakness or not a strength, if you will, and saying, how can I look at through this through the lens of an opportunity to learn? And how can I look at this through the lens that is through my strength, and just reframing your approach? And that takes a lot of intentionality and effort and work. And bringing in somebody, like you said, collaborating with somebody who does have that strength and saying, hey, how do you do that?
Mhm.
What are some tips that I can bring into me? And I love the idea of collaborating in a way. It's like, hey, you're really good at this. How can I learn from you? Even though I know it'll never be like my top strength, that's my reality. But if I can just get 1% better at keeping my eyes on the road, if I can just get 1% better at communication, if I can just get 1% better at trying to stay organized, being efficient, eating better, working out more, being a little bit more considerate. We just went through this during Christmas time. I'm the worst gift giver. I'm so bad at giving gifts. I wish that I was more caring and considerate in that area, and my husband gives me so much crap about it, but it doesn't come naturally to me to think about what can I get everybody for Christmas that they would enjoy, right? To me, I'm the kind of person, if I see something out and about and I'm like, oh, so and so would really love that, I'm going to buy the gift and I'm going to give it to them right then and there for no reason. And so to force getting gifts during Christmas just to check the box to say, I need to give you a Christmas gift, it goes against every grain in my body. And so it is so hard for me to just check the box just to give somebody a gift just because it's Christmas. Like, I want to give them something that I truly think they would enjoy, benefit from, or feel appreciated with when I come across the thing. And so I still have my niece's Christmas gift in my Jeep. I should probably send it off, but I just I'm so bad at it. And so a lot of the times I'll be like, "Can you just go shopping for me?" And my husband will go Christmas shopping, which is so not stereotypical, but he's better at buying stuff than I am. And it is just one of those things that I've just embraced. I'm just not good at giving gifts. It's just not my thing.
Oh, that is so funny. I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's something you're either good at or you're not. There's no in between. And my wife is so great at buying gifts. Like, she cares and like she tries to pick the perfect gift. And I'm absolutely horrible at it. I guess it was the first year we were married, and she likes telling this story. she had made some comment about, if we had a fireproof box or safe or something that we could put some of our documents in, that'd be great. And so I don't know if it was her birthday or if it was Christmas, so I bought her one. And I'm thinking, she asked for that, right? That's what she wants. And
You got her a
so,
thing for her birthday.
never buy your wife a fireproof box for her birthday because, you know, I'm still paying for that. And but I was like, well, you
Yeah,
brought it up.
I
You laid the seed in my mind, and but now it's like how bad I am at this. It's I can't
yeah.
help it. I'm just not good at it.
I know, I know. I told my husband because our wedding anniversary is on Monday, and I was like, "Well, we're getting a beef, right? Like we're getting all of our beef in." And so I was like, that's not cheap. I said, "How about I get you a freezer full of beef and then I'll make you steaks for supper? Is that like we good?"
That
He's
sounds
like,
great. Yeah.
I guess. So, I'm easy to please when it comes to that stuff, like, I don't expect I would rather you buy me nothing than buy me I told him this when we first started dating, I was like, "I would rather you buy me nothing and spend time with me than buy me, like, a stuffed teddy bear and flowers, like, please don't do that. That is a waste of money. Don't do
Yeah.
that." And so I think that comes back to the communication piece and really setting those expectations, right? Same thing with your wife. She was just saying that she wanted one. She wasn't saying, Adam, love of my life, please buy me a fireproof box for my birthday or
Yeah.
Christmas present. I don't like that's not romantic. So that's
So
partly on her for not setting expectations.
that's one of those. That's one of those mistakes that Jay was talking about. I've only made it once, and I won't make it again.
Oh, yeah, you learned. You
Yeah,
learned your
I learned from
lesson.
that
Yeah,
pretty
that's
quick.
well, and I don't remember the exact don't quote me on this, but I feel like I heard somewhere that communication is like 80% about how the other person interprets what you're saying and only 20% about what you're actually saying. And I think that that's really important to remember is like communication isn't about me telling somebody. Communication is how are they interpreting what I'm trying to convey. And I think that's super important.
So you're saying I probably wasn't listening to her, like she always tells me I'm not listening to her.
I'm
That
saying it
sounds
could
that sounds
be a
accurate.
compilation of things.
Yeah.
It could be a mixture of things. Yeah, and both parties are responsible, right? Like, when we talk about boundaries, right? Like, if you set a boundary, but you've never communicated the boundary, how can you expect nobody to cross the line? Like, of course, people are gonna cross the line because you never communicated that you had the boundary, right? And
Right.
so, it is important, and it's both parties' responsibility in that point. So, oh, this is such a good conversation. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing a little bit about your leadership journey and how you got to where you are, how you help other people in your life, both personally and professionally, with their leadership, how you take care of yourself and your self leadership. I just think that this is a fascinating story and like I said, it's been such a rewarding insider look to your company and how Tosh Farms has built this culture, right? Like both Jay and Jimmy and the others that you guys have built a culture that's just super impressive. And I've just loved working with you guys. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing that with my listeners here on the AgriMinds podcast. I just am super appreciative of it.
Oh no, thank you. It's an honor to be asked to do something like this. And with our conversations before, you do a good job of pulling the conversations out of me and getting me thinking a little deeper about some stuff. And I enjoyed it. And anytime that I can talk, about the pork industry and about where I work and the people I work with, I don't miss the opportunity.
Well, and I'll add on to that. I grew up in row crops. So we raised corn and soybeans. I didn't have exposure to livestock growing up. And so when we first started working together, I was like, I had a little bit of imposter syndrome. I'm like, crap, I don't know a whole lot about the pork industry. And so I kind of got in my head a little bit. I'm just being real vulnerable with you. And then I remembered, like, I'm not supposed to be the expert in the pork industry. Y'all are supposed to be the experts in the pork industry. I'm the expert at being the coach. That's my role. And so I think that that's another thing to remember is like, there's always like come with your strengths to the conversation, and there's always an opportunity to learn. And I have learned so much about the pork industry since our time working together, and I think you guys do an amazing job of breaking it down, sharing the importance of why you're doing things the way that you're doing and how you're doing the things that you're doing, and training other people. And so I would highly recommend, if you are listening to this and you're looking for an opportunity to join a company that has an amazing culture, who invests in their people, who truly care about you as a human being and not just an employee or another number, I would highly encourage you to check out Tosh Farms. And I'd be more than happy to connect you with Adam to just learn about what they do, right? And how they do it. And so, like I said, I would highly encourage you to reach out to them if you're in the job market and have an interest in working with pigs, maybe being a baby pig tech. I think it would be awesome to snuggle with baby pigs all day. So
And
thank you
that's
so
exactly what
much
they do every
for,
day. Yeah.
yeah, awesome. Well, thank you, Adam, so much for coming on and joining the AgriMinds podcast.
Thank you, Kacee.